Welcome to the Board Policy Committee meeting for December 20th, 2016 for the School District of Waukesha. Are we properly posted, Lynn? We are, thank you. And this would be the opportunity for citizens that wish to address this committee to do so, and I see none in the room. So we'll go right past that to our policy items. First on the action item list is the approval of the policy minutes from our November meeting. And I would be seeking approval, motion.
So moved.
Moved by Barbara.
I'll second.
Seconded by Greg. Are there any questions or changes that need to be done to the minutes from our meeting? Seeing none, then we will, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. 5-0, Lynn. Okay, the next item on our list, a little bit meatier than that, was the approval of the Neola policy series from 5,000 to 9,000, which was the latter two books in your packet. I see in our notes from Joe that they have been re-reviewed, if there is such a word, by Jody Landish, Steve Schloman, Darren Clark. Took the opportunity to review those prior to tonight, and only minor adjustments need to be made. Joe, anything else?
I just reiterate the adjustment pieces. We continue to go through and look for the spelling and the grammar pieces. Continue to update that to the best that any of our eyes can do. We have met, continue to cycle back with the administrator for the individual departments, reviewed the policies, making sure that what we did this past summer is the direction that we want to go and still recommend. It is. We have changed minor wording in and around some policies just to make sure that that what's being recommended is reflective of our practice. One of those examples was in the finance section when I met with Darren Clark. When we make a payment to a vendor, the wording in the policy says that the board would approve whoever the vendors were and the banks that they would be using. The practicality of that, when you look at our monthly bills, it just wouldn't be there. So the word shall was turned to may, and then the may would be applied to bigger things and clarified in our administrative guidelines around a policy. But what we did this past summer has been very reflective of what is in policy and what we're continuing to recommend to the board.
Thank you.
Recommend to the committee to recommend.
Yeah. And as we, just to reiterate what we want to do with these recommendations from this committee, once approved at the committee, we will be taking them to the, get my dates straight now, we will be taking this for the first reading in January, along with what is already at the board, which is the first reading on the 0 through 3,000 series, and then in February we're seeking approval of the whole packet. Barbara.
Joe, do all board members have these?
Yes.
Okay, good.
From the committee members here, in your opportunities to look over the 5,000 through 9,000 series, were there any things that you wanted to address? I had a group of them I gave to Joel, and Lynn already took care of, so. Barbara?
Well, I went through the 5,000, which one did I go through? I went through the last one today, and it took me 3 hours. And I didn't even read every page. I just went through every page. It was quite a job, and I don't mind doing it, but it's just, I know that there are things I probably missed, and I feel badly about that, but we'll see as we go along. We can fix things, right?
The process, again, and the thing that I'm most comfortable about doing this, our process for policy revision or adoption of new policy will always be the same.
Be the same, okay, I thought so.
Administrative recommendation to the policy committee. The policy committee reviews it, takes it to the full board, comes back to committee, goes back to the board for final approval. That will never change. Okay. Just to expand on your point a little bit, there are a lot of people who are going back and reading these and putting their eyes on it, so that it is, nothing is perfect.
No,
it will be as near perfect as we could possibly make it.
Sure.
With the caveat that Neola this summer is going to send us a packet of policies that are going to be needing to be reviewed.
Really?
So we're going to be back at the review and revision, addition of policies, deletion of policies, based off of, again, changes in law, changes in statute, whatever controls need to be there, we're going to be in that process of.
Joe, what will our relationship with Neola be from here on in?
It'll be an annual service fee to host
Okay.
the website.
Okay,
And then they will provide us with policy change,
Okay.
recommendations
yeah.
for policy review.
Okay.
Based off of any law change that happens.
and is this going to be ongoing?
From now until,
Kingdom come?
you bet,
Okay,
Cancels it.
yep.
Yeah, there are some very important words in what just took place, and that is, Barbara, you're right. It's been a lot, but you shouldn't feel bad about missing something because we're gonna be
sure.
reviewing these constantly. It's a dynamic instrument, not a concrete instrument.
that's right.
And, we're going to have the opportunities always to redo these. We will certainly be, because we're not doing this now, our implementation to the significant changes to the policies and new or revised policies will be going forward as it always has. And these are our policies, so what we get from Neola is, like you said, a recommendation. It is our policy to approve that.
Question.
Yes.
Will Neola be sending us something every month?
They do a semi-annual update to districts.
Okay, semi-annual.
They will give us more updates. So say there is a busy legislative session,
Yes,
and that session were to wrap up by November-ish. That doesn't necessarily align fully with the Neola update. If there's something that comes out of the state legislature that we have to adjust to, we will get that
okay.
very shortly after that is done, and then we will be able to put it into discussion to act on if it's appropriate for us.
Can I ask
State
one
or
more
federal?
question?
State and federal, yes.
I have one more question. Are these, what's contained herein, is this uniquely ours, or other school districts have similar policy books?
Other districts have similar policy books for what would be, there are policies that are boilerplate policies. The non-discrimination policy, which we've talked about, is a boilerplate policy. It comes from the Office of Civil Rights. It's the policy that we need to operate off of in Waukesha, that they need to operate off of in Superior, Wisconsin.
sure.
It is what it is. The policies that we have valued in Waukesha, the naming of schools, the review process for curriculum materials. I think there was the book readings conversation that happened a couple of years back. The policy around field trips, which we spent
Yes,
significant time
we did.
developing. Those are uniquely Waukesha policies. Okay. And the other part of it is we did not choose to adopt every single Neola recommendation.
I see.
There were some things that were in Neola that were optional policies. Some of them were more statements of philosophy that were not necessarily policies that we would use in Waukesha. Those aren't included in the book. There's a lot of policies in this book that are uniquely Waukesha that nobody else would have. So I think, again, based off of what our conversation was, you would see some similarities based off of a federal law across the system. You would also see a lot of uniquely Waukesha policy.
Thank you.
Good. Anybody else with a question? Something specific in the 5,000 through 9,000 series? No? Yes.
If I could add just one thing again, what you see in these books here still exists in draft. It's not how we're operating as a system. In February, should the board approve it in February, then it will be how we operate. The other part of that is, as we have gone through and done our spelling checks and our grammar checks and provided some clarification, what is here in the books is still a draft that's being debated. Lynn has updated electronically the policies online, which will be our working book once the book is approved.
February.
So these things, once we approve it, will not even be the current set per se.
Okay. Joe, Barb?
Would you say that these policies pretty much reflect what we used to do, but then added on some extra things that we were supposed to do?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then on the other end of it, I think it weeded out some things that we were doing that we didn't.
Okay.
Some language was cleaned up.
Sure.
So.
Okay, this is an action item, and we would be wanting to approve this so that we can take it to the January, excuse me, to the January board meeting for its first reading. So is there a motion to approve the Neola Policy Series 5,000 through 9,000?
So moved.
Barbara moved?
Yep.
Seconded by Amanda? Okay, any further questions? All in favor of approving that, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Lynn. Okay. We did have, on the agenda, we have information item to revisit Neola Policy Series 0 through 4,000, which we approved previously, but if there is something more that somebody wants to discuss on that, that would be open. I know, Greg, did you want to ask a question on that?
Yeah, just to look at policy 3112, because I know we talked about it as a committee last time.
Right.
We didn't really put any finalization to that with board staff communications. I guess I just have, you know, the more I've looked at this, see that the language is drafted, I feel is like sending the wrong message that that would not be consistent with what I think we want in this policy. I think the wording at times has like a negative tone to it, and when I'm talking about that, I see words like failure to do so. The line that says failure to do so may result in employee discipline. Section A, where it says all communication. I mean, there's a difference between all and communication. I mean, all communication and communication. All means everything. I'm not sure that we want this policy to be perceived as it is written, and that's my concern. And I agree with the part that in the first paragraph that talks about the employees are expected to follow the established chain of command as described in this policy. Obviously, as a board, that's our job, is to set the policy and not to be dealing with the ins and outs of everyday life in the school district of Waukesha. But I guess I'm concerned with the part there that says failure to do so may result in employee discipline. And all communications, I have communications with people all the time. If it's something that I needed to refer anyone to, I would be referring it to the appropriate person on the chain of command. I'm not like dealing with issues in the district other than the ones that are brought to the board. So, I mean, I think for my hang-up, it's the employee discipline, and it's all communications. I mean, that those two words, or those two sections seem to...
Could you read the rest of the sentence, all?
All communication from staff members related to the performance of their job duties or responsibilities to the board or its committees shall be submitted through the superintendent. And I guess I would say I'm breaking that policy. I'm not out there, you know, trying to create havoc or chaos, but I mean, I'm breaking that on a weekly basis.
Okay, there are a couple ways to deal with this. One would be we could make changes and reapprove. If the recommendation and to revisit a previous motion is made by somebody who agreed to that previous motion, we can revisit it. So that would be appropriate. So we could make a change in it if we want to.
I mean, I think anytime I talk to a staff person, it probably has, in the conversation, it probably has something to do with their job responsibilities. I don't think I've ever talked to a staff person since I've been on the board about their job performance, but about what they're doing day in and day out. And this says job duties or responsibilities to the board. I talk about what they're doing in their classroom all the time. And I feel like that's kind of an important link to the board, to have that open communication. I guess I just don't think we want to send the message that any staff person that talks to a board member could be disciplined.
Okay, now, let's see if there's other issues, or not other issues, other emotions following this, Barbara.
Well, I agree. I guess I don't have a problem with a professional staff calling us and asking us a question. I don't know that we want to go through the principal to the central office, the superintendent, to get permission to do that. I guess I'm uncomfortable with that. I think that, we should all have an open conversations with each other. We're all in this business for the same thing, the student learning, and that, to me, that it discourages it a little bit. Could you address that, Joe?
The statement there talks about communications from staff related to the performance of their job duties or responsibilities to the board and its committees. It's their job performance that we're talking about. It's the evaluation associated with that performance. It is what are the day-to-day duties of that. And so the policy aims to address, grounded in court cases on the following page, how communication should go between a staff member and the Board of Ed around job duties. And when we talked about this last time, that's not talking about come on in and read to my third grade class. That's not come into the performance or take a walk around the school and visit classrooms. Yeah. It's really related to job performance. And job performance is associated with actually how they're performing as an educator in our system.
Yeah, that wouldn't be our business to do that.
I guess this is something that I brought up last month as well. So I guess there's a little bit of a signal in here that if several of us are having trouble with it, maybe we ought to consider whether there's a better way to word it. Greg has a little issue with it. I had an issue with it last month. Barb tends to see the same. And then maybe that what we're trying to get at is correct, but it's not properly worded to get at it. Now, I don't have, I forgot about bringing those pages along. They wouldn't have fit in my briefcase anyway. So now, I'm not sure if we try to reword this, we then have to do another first reading on it?
If you're providing clarification to the policy,
that would be appropriate.
Substantially changing the policy. If we're missing a word in there, such as performance evaluation of their job duties.
That would be significantly more restrictive than the way it's currently worded, and I think that's something that Greg is interested in, as opposed to all. So he could actually take the word all out and say communication related to the evaluation of the job performance. That would make a big difference to me as well. I mean, we understand it when we're talking about it, but the problem is it's raised three people's issues here, at least three. So, okay, so that.
And it does say that they can, this procedure does not deny any staff member the right to appeal to the board. I mean,
that's further on.
That's appropriate. I mean, not that it's going to be the first step, but on that chain of command, it would be there.
So what we've really done is been more definitive about which conversations we're talking about, as opposed to all and any of those other things, which then, if we are being specific about what we're talking about as being the evaluation part of a job performance, then the discipline thing could probably just stay the way it is. That's what I'm thinking.
If it's just job performance.
Evaluations.
Right.
Yes, Joe.
For clarification, if we were to change that sentence, and just please let me read all first. All communications from staff members related to the performance evaluation of their job duties or responsibilities to the board. If we add the evaluation piece in, just as a point of clarification, item is listed as information item, possible action item. So you're in a position where you could take action on this particular policy tonight as a committee.
Oh, it is, yes, that's right.
Which then would move forward into the next, we could go into the next board meeting with.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd rather take care of it when it's fresh in our heads.
Let's, when you've got
that's totally different than all communication. I mean, this is job performance, which is the job of administrators, not the job of the board. Exactly.
You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable with the failure to do so may result in employee discipline, but.
Is that necessary to have that statement there, Joe? And if so, why?
Well, I would say that as a matter of, if a staff member is in an evaluation cycle, or a staff member does something that would require discipline related to their job performance, If that staff member reaches out to an individual board member and the individual board member were to intervene in that, then the evaluation, there's not as much, the validity of that evaluation could go away. Because as a board member or as a board as a whole, you all would be in a position that could influence how that is addressed. And that then would take away the validity of the evaluation.
Yeah. Yes, Greg.
And if that failure to do so may result in employee discipline was included under section A instead of at the top there, I would look at that differently. When it talks about their job performance, if that sentence was dropped down to section A, because then it's specifically related only to job performance. When I read the first paragraph, it seems a little strong, but I wouldn't have a problem with it if it was in section A.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
It was dropped down to section A instead of, this is related to job performance.
See what he's saying, Joe? Is that okay?
If it's moved down into that section, then I think we would need to look at board communications to staff, just to make sure that the policy, that we would make sure that that sentence is complete, because where it's listed in the policy, it covers sections A, B, and then I believe on the next page, C. If we move it into A, we may have to then move it into C, for instance, whatever. And I would need to review the wording. Where it's currently at, it applies to the whole policy.
Well, the word may,
Despite moving it down, it loses, I think where it is right now, the failure sentence is predicated on what comes before it, the sentence before it. So
I guess the piece that I'd add to this is we still have yet to develop the administrative guideline associated with this policy. And one of the things that I'm going to mention tonight in other business is just we are going to, if all things go accordingly, we'll have an approved policy manual in February. And the work that we did around this was the key administrative guidelines that were currently in policy, the policy guidelines. The key ones have been moved into policy, thinking of our discipline and such. Moving forward, we are going to then embark on the work of creating the administrative rules associated with these policies. And in that, then you would see what clarifiers. I mean, if there's a piece of policy that you need to see clarified as a board, we certainly can bring that back to you in one of our future policy committee meetings so you're aware of the administrative rules with it. But as you read these policies, there are yet to have administrative guidelines developed for them.
I think the fact that the word may is in there is,
It's not shall be disciplined, it's may be.
Still strong. I don't know.
well, could we do anything along the lines of or something like that? Review and may lead to discipline?
You know, I think
it's obvious, so we're going to review it. So.
I think the sentence before that is very strong. I don't know that we need to go on with failure. It says, employees are expected to follow the established chain of communications as described in this policy. Period. I don't know that we need to say that.
I agree.
You know, I don't know that we want to have discipline things in our policy.
From an enforcement standpoint, by not having the statement in there of discipline, then if an employee were to do it, and it would be disciplinary in nature, as an administrator, I would be making a recommendation to committee that that statement be added back.
Yeah.
Because then the employee did it, and we have no recourse then.
Do we have anything else in these policy books that, talk about employee discipline?
Yes, there's employee discipline in the 3,000 and 4,000 sections, which are the professional and support staff sections,
Okay.
Sure.
as well as in the
What I looked at today, too, had something about
as well as in the
staff
1,000
discipline.
section where there's the relationship between the board.
Amanda, do you have any Feelings on this?
No, I mean, I agree with what's being said. The fact that may is in that final sentence,
Softens it enough?
yes. And that's not saying that, I see where Joe's coming from an administrative standpoint. He's not gonna have anything to stand on if that line is not there. But I do sense where we don't want the employees to feel like they cannot approach us.
Right.
But I also feel that if an employee were to approach me personally, I'd stop them and say, have you spoken to who you need to speak with? You know, this is, I go on to say, this is not my place. Let me direct you to where you need to voice these concerns.
Would you say that, Amanda, if it was anything other than job-related or job performance?
No.
So that's really my issue. I mean,
Yeah.
if it was,
I think you fixed that one.
right, if it's job performance, then failure to do so would be, but
It's not,
it comes across as being,
as
"Aw."
anything.
That's how it comes across to me. So to me, if it was dropped down to section A, I would, and we talk about job performance, I would
Well,
be more comfortable with that.
you would still like to see the discipline sentence moved, and I'm not too sure we can. Because it's relevant to everything else below it, right?
Moved or eliminated?
Oh, I don't have that one.
It's related to job performance again. I mean, I think we have nothing to do with
Well, I
their
don't
job
think discipline
performance.
would fall into B at all, because that's communications in the other direction.
And it also relates to, Bill, it relates to policy 4112, because it's
Yeah.
the same policy. I guess I just look at, where it says that the policy is board staff communications, and within that first paragraph, it talks about an employee being disciplined for communicating with the board. That just seems really
Would you agree
strong.
with moving it into A and C? Taking it out of the first one? What was C?
I think if it's related to job performance, I don't have any issue with it.
Only place that discipline would fall
C
in?
has the social interaction, and it does have the clarifier in there that it says, discussions between staff and board members related to the performance of job duties or responsibilities are inappropriate violations of the chain of command. And so that is in there. So what we would have to do then is add, failure to do so may result in employee discipline to section A and then section C as well,
Take it out of the first paragraph.
if that is,
I guess because almost cosmetically, you don't like to see it right at the beginning. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
It's a first impression for me.
Joe?
And I don't think it should relate to all communication.
I think it goes beyond just cosmetic. It is, if you look at the title of the policy, it applies to all it applies to any communication between any communication. And
Are they expected to follow the chain of command for
Yeah, I
any
mean, gee,
communication? They just can't. I mean,
you walk into someone at a play and you start talking about something, it's one thing to have the policy, it's another thing to interpret the policy and how do you implement the policy. So whenever I have a discussion with a concerned employee, staff member, and it needs to be directed to the principal or whatever the appropriate person is, I'll basically make that statement right up front, and they still may want to talk about it.
That's
and I
right.
think we should still be able to kind of understand what's going on and not just immediately cut that person off. And I just, so if I was to really read this policy and interpret that, I'm like going, whoa. There's so many instances that I can think of since I've been on the board where, like you were saying, Greg, me as a board member and a staff member, there's been many times where that's been broken. If you really take that literally,
Yes.
that's been broken.
Of course.
So I can understand. It's not just since it's in that first paragraph, it applies to essentially all communication. So I think I'm getting more uncomfortable as I'm reading reading that.
More uncomfortable with what, leaving it there or moving it?
Leaving it in the first paragraph.
Yeah.
I would rather not have that in the first paragraph and move it down.
Move it to A and C?
Yep, yeah.
But C says, it talks about all the different things that the boards and staff would talk about. And then it says, board members related to the performance of job duties or responsibilities are inappropriate evaluations of the chain of command. I'm much more comfortable with that than failure to do so will be disciplined. I think.
But I would like to point out, just to make clarification, it doesn't say will be disciplined. It says may. And throughout all of the policies in this book, there is a distinction between may and shall.
Yeah.
And shall means it will happen. May means
Maybe.
it could happen if it were a violation.
Right.
It may also not happen if it wasn't deemed to be. And I believe when we talked about this last time, those invitations to come into the classroom to see how things are going, to visit events at school, the casual communication that might happen at a musical or at a football game or whatever, that is not in the category. But if it is coming down to the evaluation and the performance of the staff, then that would be a different treatment of the conversation.
I can't say in all the years I've been on the board that I ever received a phone call from anyone about discipline. You know, really. I've received lots of questions about curriculum and et cetera, but never about their performance.
That's fine.
It seems we have actually two different pieces of this issue, and maybe we could just break them apart for now. First of all, we've resolved that first sentence, I think.
Performance evaluation is
Yeah.
the recommended ad.
So everybody's okay with that one. So we might need to figure out where we are with the second part, whether we're going to move the discipline sentence out of the first paragraph and put it in A and C. Now, does somebody want to, or just want to show the old-fashioned way of doing a show of hands on this, and then we can have a motion to do it? Or do you want to have a motion to do it?
By moving that failure sentence to A and C, does that still give you the grounds that you need?
It gives us the ability to do what we need to do.
Good
Okay.
question. Thank you. Okay. Anybody want to move that sentence from?
I'll make that
Joe?
motion, yes.
From
Are we
the
clear
top
on it?
Into A and C?
Yes, the last sentence, the failure.
Okay. And that is seconded by Amanda. I saw your hand go up. Any further discussion on that delineation? Seeing none, all in favor of making that change, please say aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0, we're gonna make that move, and that would be a clarification we can just take forward with us. Okay, good.
And that would be both policies or just 3112? Or there's a 4112?
I was
Oh,
just
that's
gonna
right.
say,
There-
the same
it's-
policies in the
it's
support
identical.
section, so we'll make the same changes in both
Yeah,
places.
okay with everybody? We're gonna make it in both sections? Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
forgot about that. They're identical policies except for two different populations. Okay, excellent. Any other revisiting to the earlier policies? Good, none? That allows us to go.
Can we go back
Yes.
can we go back to that policy one more time, the 3112? Under section B, it says all official communications, policies, and directives of the board shall go communicated through the superintendent. So that means that means no one can send us an email, no one can.
Do I take the word all out again? I would.
That's, if I could just add to the.
Please, please.
That is your communication as a Board of Education, directly
That
to,
B?
that is the Board of Ed to the staff. That is not the staff to the board.
Okay, yeah, okay.
That
If I look at the
says
top, you're right.
all official communications, policies, and directives of the board
Thank you.
of staff interest and concern to the staff will be communicated through the superintendent. So that says that the superintendent and/or their
fine.
designee, because designee,
Or
Yep.
designate.
That's
yeah.
fine.
that funnels through
I understand it now,
Todd
yeah.
to our entire system.
Right.
And before there's a change to that, okay.
Okay, I get it.
Good.
Yeah, I was reading it.
Yeah, upside, yeah. Okay, Other business recommendations for future committee meetings? I think, Joe, you said you had something you wanted to discuss.
The administrative guidelines, when we first embarked on this work, we started with policy. We did not make a request at that time to do the administrative guidelines because we wanted to see where the policy work would lead us. At the January Policy Committee, I'm going to bring forth the request to buy into the Neola administrative guidelines, which will allow the hosting and the connecting and everything like that. Please don't quote me on the exact dollars, but I believe it's about $8,000, similar to what the policy purchase was. That will give us then access to what their templates are. It'll bring Richard in to help facilitate the development of the administrative guidelines. It'll help then get those linked to student manuals, employee handbooks, the policy that it's associated with, the appropriate forms, so that will complete the kind of the package of policies and guidelines for us. So I'll be bringing that forward to the committee, requesting that we purchase that. We did have the discussion at F&F around the policy. I believe at that time there wasn't much of a concern with the cost. So I think we can talk about if it needs to go to F&F, but the cost for the policies and the guidelines was budgeted for, just kind of forecasting that the work was going to need to be.
Yeah, I know we've talked about doing this. Now, these would be we always have to separate in our minds the guidelines and the guidelines, because we have the policy guidelines, which are now brought into the policy, so it's not those, it's the ones we have facetiously referred to as Todd's rules.
Todd's rules, correct.
Are there a lot of those?
I think for the 400 policies, there are approximately 300 administrative guidelines that would be associated. There are some guidelines that don't exist because the policy itself is policy and guideline.
Oh, sure.
For instance, the harassment,
there would
that
be
spells out
something.
how things are going to operate right in policy. Some of the policy work that we did around like student discipline, for instance, we took 5130G, which was our guidelines. We made it into what is our policy recommendation because we didn't want to have any sort of gap in direction. We can have a discussion, do we want to spell out in policy how each infraction is going to be handled, or should we migrate that then into an administrative guideline and review the policy? I mean, all of that can come after we pass the policy series.
Sounds fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agree.
That's it for that one?
Yep, there are no other policy recommendations to adjust current district policy at this time. The full board made the approvals at the last meeting, so we're set to go.
Oh, caught up on that, yeah.
Medication and field trip and graduation, and there's a couple of minor title changes in open enrollment policy and in the special ed program policy. So all that is set, and I believe we're ready at this point then to.
So the January board meeting, the full board meeting, will consist of just what we did here tonight, and that will be added to what we did last month for the February meeting.
Correct. We're going to bring, recommending that 5,000 through 9,000 go to the board for first reading in January. And then this series just kind of sits idle at this time. And then the recommendation at the February meeting, should this get approved for the first reading, then we would bring everything forward in February for adoption. We'll have a January policy meeting in between there. Again, if there's some questions on policy, anything that needs clarification, we can talk about that. I'm still in communication with Todd and Chris and Jody and Darren and Steve and the various departments in and around, you know, is this exactly how we need to operate? But
Still talking to you.
they haven't shut me off yet. But is this how we're operating, and then give us the opportunity to make adjustments and bring that to the January policy meeting before the fall.
Other comments, discussion items as needed? The next meeting is January 17th. If there's nothing else?
One question.
Yes,
sir.
Barbara.
It says recommendations for future committee meetings.
That's what he just gave us.
That's what he just said, okay.
Okay? We stand adjourned. Thank you.